Welcome to Around the Empire. I'm your host, Joanne Leon. This is a fully independent podcast. Lend your support at patreon.com/aroundtheempire or paypal.me/aroundtheempirepod. Also, please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. Today, with guest co-host Kelly Lane, we talk about what we're observing in real life in the days before the 2020 election. The rallies, the polls, the fear-mongering, and the extraordinary measures that have been put in place for this election. We talk about our concerns and in a bonus segment about our predictions for outcomes and things that might happen. We recorded this on November 2nd, 2020. Welcome everybody. Kelly Lane's here with me and we're going to do a pre-election discussion. It's the day before the election. Right now, we're just going to tell you what we are seeing in real life and some of our thoughts and concerns and things like that. I happen to be right outside of Philadelphia, so, kind of tied into the PA election. Kelly lives in North Carolina. These are two battleground states, so it's been pretty heavy duty here. But anyway, thank you, Kelly, for joining me today as a guest host. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we're going to try to organize this and hopefully get it done in a period of time. We both have, a lot of thoughts, a lot of anxiety. So we'll do our best. But, just kind of keep in mind, particularly if you're not here in the U.S., just how overwhelming this whole thing can be. I know that you guys, even if you're not in this country, you're generally following this like most of the world is. So you generally get it. But it is just like a tsunami. At this point, we're kind of like, just leave us alone, please. But at the same time, I think almost everybody's kind of worried about how this is going to go. And we've been told to be worried. The narrative has been well seeded that this is going to be chaotic, disruptive, and, in an unprecedented way. So there's that. But anyway, we just wanted to tell you kind of some of the interesting things that we've seen. Kelly, I was telling you that on yesterday, there was a CNN, a big screen for the election, and they're counting the number of voters who have already voted before Election Day, because that is an unprecedented thing. The whole election's being held under extraordinary measures, allegedly because of the pandemic. But we also know that it's not just Election Day. It really never ended from the 2016 election. Don't you think, Kel?
Exactly. Yes. The media onslaught has been nonstop for 4 years, pretty much all against Trump for the most part, except for, your well-known right-wing media, Fox News and the like. So yeah, I don't think they ever stopped campaigning against him, and that seems to be all that they have to offer. By they, I mean the Democrats, the establishment Democrats.
Yeah, it's much more like a war, really. But anyway, the CNN big voting screen is that 2/3 of the votes that were cast in 2016 have already been cast in 2020. And this was yesterday, and I know that number has increased. As of yesterday, it was almost 92 million ballots that had been cast. Most of those via mail, and some 32 million of them in person early voting. So today it's up to 95, so those numbers have nudged up. And also, there was one interesting thing. They said that in Texas, there were 9 million early votes, and that was the first state to have cast more votes than the total in 2016. The entire election have already been cast in Texas before the election's even held. So, that can tell you something. The polls, I have really not been paying, I don't put a lot of faith in polls. And frankly, I think a lot of people don't, because 2016 kind of wrecked the polling establishment or confidence in it.
Yes.
But there, in this morning consult poll, it's sort of a conglomerate of polls, and they have Biden really high up. they take these national polls that really don't mean anything because of our electoral system, but they have him up in I guess it's really kind of a measure of popular vote polling, something like 52 to 44. So anyway, that's what they're saying. But at the state level, they're saying that Biden is leading, and they zero in, even though we have 50 states, they really zero in on what they call battleground states or swing states. They're saying that Biden's leading in Colorado, Florida, Michigan, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And Trump is leading in Indiana, Missouri, and South Carolina. And then there are more states that are within the margin of error, and that is Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas. Yeah, and then they do a generic congressional ballot poll, which is just useless. But it's because, you have to poll every individual election. And there's how many are in the Senate? 100 in the Senate and 435 in Congress. So the generic poll favors the Democrats as well, but that's a completely useless number because it's only if you poll each individual congressional district do you really know. In the Senate, they do it state by state, and they say that the Democrats are leading. As most people know, the Senate is controlled by the Republicans right now. The House is controlled by the Democrats. The Democrats took over the House in 2018. The Senate, the Republicans have just a few seats lead. So it's a somewhat of a toss-up as to whether the Republicans are to maintain control of the Senate. Right now, they're saying that the Democrats are leading in Colorado, Michigan, North Carolina, Republicans leading in Alabama, Kentucky, and Texas, and within the margin of error are Arizona, Georgia, and South Carolina. So it doesn't, I don't think you can really tell that much from this one.
No, it's different than last time. We talked a little bit off recording about what we see in real life versus what we see in the polling and in the news. But those early voting numbers really, traditionally, early voting is typically more Democrat, and Republicans are more on election day. So I don't know, and also with record turnout, that's usually leans Democrat. So we don't really know. But from what I see, it just around the state, and I've also driven through a lot of Pennsylvania, what you see on the ground is not enthusiasm for Biden. I think there may be a lot of hold your nose and vote for him, but it's not as clear. I don't feel like in 2016, I knew the polls were wrong. I knew Trump would win. I was not surprised at all. Now, even if it were completely legitimate, no funny business with the election rigging or anything, I think I wouldn't be sure, because I think it's just hard to tell with this record turnout.
Yeah. And, that kind of gets into the next thing. I, was paying attention to some of the events this week because it's just been absolutely crazy how Joe Biden has run his campaign. These extraordinary measures for COVID, for the pandemic and the lockdowns have worked, I think, almost entirely in favor of the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And they were able to, first of all, they were able to hide their candidate, mm-hmm. even from television interviews, which is kind of interesting. But, mm-hmm. It was just nothing like any campaign I've ever seen. So they were able to hide him, which is interesting because, people said half jokingly in 2016 that, Hillary, the more people, she started out with these gigantic advantages, and then the more people saw her, the less they liked her. And, she started to go down in the polls. So people used to joke about hiding her for the whole thing. And this time they actually have done that. Mm-hmm. My mind is blown. I'm talking, spitting out these numbers and talking about it like it's an election like any other, but it is not. It's not an election like any other I've ever seen in my life. And there are a lot of things that are not like anything I've ever seen in my life. So there's that. But so Biden seems to have changed his slogan. Build Back Better was, I thought that was supposed to be it, but even that may have changed more than once, but because they started out with something about Joe and this and that, but it evolved into Build Back Better, which is kind of stealing Trump's 2016 platform, if you will. But now it's Battle for the Soul of the Nation. That's what's on all the backdrops behind him and all the.
Yeah, I saw that on the bus. We can get into that later.
Yeah, it's painted on the bus. It's on all the election screens in the background and everything. Mm-hmm. And Biden's rallies have been drive-in rallies. Some of them have been like, they said they weren't really publicly announced, and that's why nobody went. But most of them are drive-in rallies, and you can hear some horns beeping, but they never show the parking lot or whatever. They never give you a sense of the crowd at all. So I think that can only lead to one conclusion, and that is that nobody's going. So yesterday in Philadelphia, he did a rally in a church parking lot in Philadelphia. And then after the rally, he talked to a few people in a parking lot. There was like a little tent erected, and he was standing in front of that, and there were only just a few people in the camera view, because I was flipping through the different cable news channels, and I don't even stop at MSNBC anymore, really. So I just go from CNN, which is totally anti-Trump, and Fox, which is about 50% pro-Trump, depending on what time of day you're watching. All through the day, it's not all that different from CNN. Well, that's wrong, actually. In the early morning, it's very pro-Trump, the Fox and Friends or whatever it is. Then all through the day, they're like continuous coverage. It's pretty much like CNN. And then at night, it goes like radically pro-Trump in the Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, all those shows. So anyway, they were live streaming a Trump event, then they switched over to this Biden event, and they filmed the whole thing with him talking in the parking lot. And, it was nothing about policy. It was just sort of platitude talking point after platitude talking point through a mask. So the slurs, I couldn't tell if it was his normal slurs or the slurring speech, or whether it was, the mask. And but on the stage, he's not wearing a mask anymore, which he used to do even at the car rallies. And that's very indicative of everything I have seen. Like Kelly was saying, in real life, I don't see this overwhelming support for Biden anywhere. I see Trump signs in New York and New Jersey, two blue states that like never go to a Republican for president. They do have Republican governors sometimes, but lately the Trump supporters have been doing car rallies. I think they call it the Trump trains or whatever, and they fly these giant flags. And they were clogging up major highways, and I saw some live streams of that. I don't see anything like that for Biden, and I don't know why. Why aren't his supporters organizing that kind of thing? I don't get it. Do you?
Especially if they're in cars. No, I think it's just a lack of enthusiasm. I don't underestimate, though, again, like I said, that with all this high voter turnout, that it isn't possible those are votes for Biden, but the enthusiasm just isn't there. And I should note, though, I am in North Carolina. I'm in a very blue pocket. It's a Research Triangle Park area, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and Chapel Hill specifically is very blue. I think it's the county is 70% Democrat, 70 plus blue always. So it's a little anomaly in a pretty red state, which is what makes it purple. But no, I don't see, you don't even see, I almost never see a bumper sticker. I see some Biden signs out, but I think it's just, the whole thing is just, let's get Trump out. That's all it is. It's not Biden. It's a anti-Trump. That's it.
Yeah, and from like old friends and family, I think they're on board with that pretty much. Let's just get Trump out. So I have seen that evidence, but it's very, very anecdotal. I don't see it when I'm out on the street anywhere. And I'm in Camden County. That is a it might be the bluest county in the country or something. It's like really, I mean, a blue state in about the bluest kind of county you can get.
Mm-hmm.
I have neighbors who will definitely be Trump supporters. So it's not like every single person is a Democrat or going to vote Democrat. So, but even so, it's still, I think a lot of people might be confused that blue states are, and like overwhelmingly blue.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really true. There's still a significant number of people who are from other parties here too, but never enough to win national level elections, it seems like. Although we do have quite a number of congressional seats, but a lot of those flipped in 2018, but that's a whole nother story. But another Biden rally that I wanted to bring up is that I think this was on Saturday. So like on a weekend. So more people, I think, generally are able to attend events on weekends, and everyone's got flexible, almost everyone's got flexible schedules now. So it's just generally easier to do things. But this one was in Detroit, Michigan, and it was with Obama.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a rarity. I think they've done some online events. I don't know if they've ever done any in-person events together. I think this might be the only one. And so I looked at that. Obama and Biden were only on stage together for seconds, just a few seconds. Obama did the opener, and then, they did their exchange. And during this, they did show the crowd a little bit. And there's really hardly anyone there. I can only see maybe 20 or 30 people. There are probably more, but that's all I can see on this camera. Even right before Obama spoke, I don't know, just eyeing it up, that might be maybe 100. I don't know. Doesn't look it. And so that I thought was pretty surprising too, because Obama used to fill giant parks with people, stadiums,
Mm-hmm.
and he could not do that. And of course, you had mentioned before, Kelly, that it's the people are afraid of in-person events. Some are, but I still found that really surprising.
Yes, and one thing about the early voting, well, with these, when we've seen it on the news, these huge lines of and record numbers of people early voting, then they're all out at polling places in contact with each other. I mean, presumably with, everyone with masks and social distancing, but it kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, well, what was the whole point of doing the mail-in when you've got all these early voting sites open and record numbers of people out voting like normal?
Yeah.
It is puzzling.
And the protests, that was not a problem at all, going out to protest. Frankly, the traffic here, the car traffic, is almost back to pre-COVID normal. So, yeah, I don't know, the extraordinary measures. Again, they always seem to go in one direction.
Right.
So that's what I saw in the events that I found to be interesting. And I just want to mention one more thing that hasn't happened yet. Biden is doing 2 big Pennsylvania events tonight, I think. And he's got Lady Gaga in Pittsburgh, and then John Legend in Philadelphia. So I suspect that if they can't draw a crowd, I don't know who could, but I would think that the visuals, that's going to be Biden's visuals for this whole post-election period. They're going to, show pictures from an event like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, did you hear? There's just today I saw a Pittsburgh paper. I'm not sure which one it is. Pittsburgh Post Gazette endorses Trump. It's the first time they have endorsed a Republican candidate since Nixon in 1972.
Oh,
yeah, interesting, huh?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think that's their big paper. A lot of cities are down to one paper now.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, that is interesting. But yeah, I thought those events were, we'll see how they go. But
I think a lot of Americans also, as much as we're obsessed as a culture with celebrity stuff, I think a lot of people are just so fed up with being told how to vote by Hollywood. You know, it's just to me, it's just nauseating every time you hear about these events with entertainers. I don't know. I think a lot of America's fed up with it. They're more concerned about putting food on the table, making ends meet, and it's just kind of it's more elitist stuff.
yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Uh, yeah, I know I am completely fed up with it. And I'll even mention one of my favorite musicians from, I don't know, for decades now is Van Morrison. And he did this series of songs, anti-lockdown songs. And in one of them, one of the lines is something like, we just stop letting celebrities tell us how to feel. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting. But he is a celebrity too, so.
Right.
And but so getting on one other issue with the campaigns, it seems like the lockdowns themselves have become a voting issue. Trump is like turning on Fauci, which he was afraid to do before, although you could tell there was always tension because Fauci flip-flopped on him. He initially started saying, like, don't wear masks and COVID's not going to be a problem here. And then all of a sudden he was the opposite. So, but Trump believed that he was super popular. And so he was afraid to criticize him. But now he's criticizing him and he's blasting out these tweets. I haven't seen his tweets from today, but yesterday there was one. It said, Biden wants to, all caps, lock down our country, maybe for years. Crazy. There will be, all caps, no lockdowns. The great American comeback is underway. And then in another one, he says that this election is a choice between a Trump super boom or a Biden depression. And it's between a safe vaccine and a devastating Biden lockdown. So, and Biden has, like I said, eased up. He stopped showing his face with the mask all the time. And he's using a lot of Trump's talking points from 2016, bring back manufacturing, rebuild, and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's somewhat interesting.
Yeah, I do wonder, just real quick, we won't get too much into COVID itself, but with the headlines coming from Europe last week, I do kind of wonder if we will be seeing an increase, not just cases, but actual hospitalizations and deaths, because it got kind of scary, I guess, in France and Germany, and I think the UK over weekend before this last one. So I guess that's always possible. So I mean, I do think it's real and it's a concern, but it absolutely has been completely politicized here. Whether you wear a mask or you don't is like a signal of whether you're a Trump supporter or not, which is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. It's like I don't really care that the masks are annoying, but I just keep one in my purse and I just put it on when I go into a store, and then I just rip it off when I'm in the parking lot. And
Right.
luckily, I'm not one of the people that has to wear them all day at work and things.
Mm-hmm.
So, because they make my face break out in hives, and it's
Oh, I know. I went and got a haircut for the first time, pandemic hair, and I had to wear it the whole time. And I can't imagine having to do that all day long. So
yeah.
those of us that are home don't have to deal with it. But yeah, we may see another wave of it if what has happened in Europe is any indication. But we'll have to see what happens with that.
But
But
I mean, everyone's complying, but it's very cursory. You go into the diner or restaurant, you have to wear it when you're walking in, but as soon as you sit down at the table, you could take it off.
yeah, that really just doesn't make any sense at
Yeah.
all. It doesn't. And just like the voting, I mean, why are we not just doing it all in person if we had this many out voting early?
Yeah. Yeah. The extraordinary measures have been, this whole thing has been exploited quite a lot, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There was one poll, I think, that had the Democrats a little worried, and that was the Des Moines Register, which is one of those polls where, they apparently have a great track record because, if someone wins that poll, then they're going to win the election or whatever. But I think the November 1st Des Moines Register, this is in Iowa, had Trump leading Biden. So I don't really know what because the ABC News, Washington Post poll in Wisconsin had Biden ahead by like 17 points. So I've been paying very little attention to the polls. And I wonder if I can find this. So my partner is in Pennsylvania, southeastern Pennsylvania, and drives here most days. And he drives kind of through some back roads. And he's been saying that it's just all Trump signs again in southeast Pennsylvania that he sees. But today somebody put out a new one, and it said, "America for sale. Call Hunter Biden. 1-800-I-KNOW-JOE." So I thought that was kind of funny, and maybe that can roll us into our next topic, Callie. Actually, first we do want to talk a little bit about the Biden leaks and the censorship, but I think we have a little bit more on Pennsylvania and North Carolina, things we've seen that we think are interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So specifically about, I guess this has happened in a lot of states, but in North Carolina and in Pennsylvania, extending the mail-in ballot deadline. And here, the U.S. Supreme Court denied a request, which was by state Republicans, to strike down North Carolina's extension of its mail-in voting deadline. And so I believe it's 12 days after, so they can still receive ballots.
Whoa.
Yes.
Okay, that's crazy. Whatever.
Yeah, so they have to be postmarked on election day. Excuse me, it's 9 days. I apologize. So 9 days, but so they have to. Let's see. North Carolina State Board of Elections extended its mail-in ballot deadline to November 12th, 9 days after Election Day. And so the Board of Elections is Democrat controlled. 2 Republicans, I'll get into the story in a minute. I learned earlier today that 2 of them resigned. The 2 Republicans resigned at the end of September and had to be replaced. So there was some scuffle going on there about all of this. But we're not going to know answers until at least 9 days post election.
Yeah. And in Pennsylvania, 7 counties now, that was yesterday, it may be more now. 7 counties have decided that they're not going to count the mail-in ballots on election day. They're going to wait till the next day.
Right. They're not even starting counting. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And those were all red counties?
Yeah, they were all red counties in 2016. They all voted for, or Trump won in all those counties. It's not a significant number in terms of the total amount of votes that were cast in 2016. There were, I think, some 6 million cast in total, and this is only 150,000. But the relevant number here, and the number that the Democrats are certainly shooting for, is that Trump only won Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes. So it certainly could be enough to change the election night. I assume the media is still going to be making some kind of projections or calls. They're certainly going to say who's leading what state election night, even though the Democrats have they've gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure to extend those periods of time that they could continue counting ballots and to just sort of drag out the result as long as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I think, no matter what side you're on, these kinds of changes, in battle, in the last minute in battleground states should raise red flags. We should pay attention to why is this happening exactly. So the other thing that I found, and I did get a response from this organization today, but an organization that has done, it's an international organization that has done observations of elections here. It's called OSCEPA, and you can go to oscepa.org. They've been here, have come to North Carolina for many years, and they were turned away this year. They were not allowed to observe. Well, that just kind of got my attention. Like, well, why all of a sudden? And they're using some, old rule about you have to, be a voter or work with the elections or whatever to be there. Well, that's been the same all along. So they said that it would be in their report about why, this year of why this happened. And I asked them specifically, I tweeted at them numerous times when I saw this article, and I also tweeted at the State Board of Elections. I didn't get any response from them. But I asked if this was happening, had happened in any other battleground state. So just curious. And they responded that we were not explicitly denied access to any other states, but based on previous experience and legal restrictions, the OSCEPA over the years has decided not to attempt deployment to a number of states. These include Ohio, Florida, 2 battleground states, Texas, and a few others. So I just, to me, it does just raise suspicion. Like, why does this North Carolina Board of Elections all of a sudden not want observers there? It seems fishy to me. I mean, especially when there's no real reason for it that they can cite that makes sense. So,
wasn't the initial report about that someone from the OSCE was angry about this, was objecting to it?
Well, they just said that they said that there's no reason for it, just as I said before, that they considered it a breach of commitment.
Right.
Okay. So the group considers North Carolina's decision a breach of commitment and expects the episode to feature in its upcoming report on the November 3rd election in the battleground state, just because, it had allowed election observers to monitor their polling sites, in many years prior. So all of a sudden, they forced this international team to cancel its visit at the last minute.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's it. It was just odd. And so it caught my attention. I'm glad they did respond. I don't know, it doesn't really shine any more light on why. So I did some more digging. I was just curious more about the State Board of Elections and learned, of course, we have Democratic governor, and the State Board of Elections is 3 Democrats to 2 Republicans. And as it turns out, the 2 Republicans resigned just the end of September and had to be replaced. So let's see, this article says, the 2 Republican members of the North Carolina State Board of Elections abruptly resigned Wednesday, this was September 24th, saying in separate letters that they felt misled by the state attorney general's office and board staff when they agreed to a settlement that would allow voters to fix absentee ballots with missing information. And there are letters from each of these members that resigned. And, they basically stated that it wasn't clear to them, that it was misleading, that they didn't want to do away with the witness requirement for signing an absentee ballot. And so anyway, just another thing that, you wonder what's going on.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, I'm a lefty independent.
Yeah, me too. Although I do have conservative positions, or a little bit more conservative positions on some issues, but I come from 3 generations of Democrats. I was a lifelong Democrat until recent years. I'm now an independent. So I don't tend to be biased toward I've been conditioned to not like or trust the Republican Party. So.
Right, exactly. But I think, as you said at the beginning, that things are just, it's like no other election before. Everything is at a fever pitch. The polarization of the two parties and people, the tribalism, the road rage incidents with the Trump train and the Biden bus, all of it. I mean, our elected officials can't seem to work together on anything. It's just so polarized. And I just do my best to try to not, even though I haven't ever voted Republican, if they're the ones in the right, they're the ones in the right. And I just try to look at the facts, and I just see that the majority of the election security community is very much in the pocket of with the Democrats, and they don't seem to want to look at things like just objectively, and that really concerns me. So,
yeah, if we have time, I'll talk a little bit more about the two main complaints: voter suppression and voter fraud, and just some thoughts on that. But one more thing from Pennsylvania, one of the things that the pro-Trump camp is complaining about is that the Attorney General, his name's Josh Shapiro, put out a tweet and said, if all the votes are added up in PA, this is on Twitter, this is the guy himself, the Attorney General himself tweeting this, if all the votes are added up in PA, Trump is going to lose. That's why he's working overtime to subtract as many votes as possible from this process. For the record, he's 0-6 against us in court. We've protected voting rights. So ignore the noise, vote. So they are saying, well, how does he know what the outcome of the election is?
mm-hmm.
It wasn't smart, and they said this will probably be used in court. They're all ready for court, but
right.
That's the kind of thing. Philadelphia has just, a lot of people are calling it the epicenter. The media has been calling it ground zero, which frankly has been making people pretty nervous. All these seeding a narrative of chaos and disruption in Philadelphia, which is so close to me that it would definitely affect me, although I'm far enough away to not have to worry about, an attack on the city, I guess. But everybody's on edge, and it's by design. It's not just like something we imagined. We've been the fear mongering has just been outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the other thing that has been pretty worrying, and that is the censorship and the Biden leaks. Without going to the Hunter Biden laptop, with both salacious materials and evidence of deals, just influence peddling. Hunter Biden is the bag man, and it looks like there's a de facto Biden foundation, like the Clinton Foundation, where people from other countries essentially do bribes. They might even technically be legal, but Joe Biden denies all of it. He has not addressed any details about it. They've kept reporters away from him almost completely. I haven't seen him challenge on anything really. In the debate, he very conveniently, I think the day of or the day before the debate, a big letter came out from, I think, 50 former intelligence officials, including 5 former CIA, including John Brennan and Hayden and I guess Morell, I don't know who, some of them who've been, at the heart of the Russiagate thing from the start. And Biden just threw that out as his defense, saying that that they had determined. Biden simplified it into something they actually didn't really say, but he basically said it's Russian disinformation, and I have a letter from 50 intelligence officials, so trust them. They say it's Russian disinformation. Just disregard all of it, which will work with some people, but there were some specifics reported. There was censorship on a level I have never seen before. For 2 weeks, the New York Post, something like a 200-year-old newspaper, was suspended from Twitter, and links to its story were blocked. This particular URL, nowhere on the entire Twitter site were you allowed to type in that link, including in personal messages. Even if you weren't publicly tweeting it, you were just sending it to a friend, which I personally experienced, and it got blocked on a sham of an error message too. By the way, they said it, this looks like a bot or spam, and we're blocking it. But that's not why it was blocked.
They suspended or blocked the Trump campaign and Kayleigh McEnany, I'm saying her name correctly, White House press secretary.
So big tech is like all in, not to mention the manipulation of Google search results. I've just never seen anything like this. And Glenn Greenwald has resigned over it from The Intercept. Now, this isn't his first issue with The Intercept. The first time I saw him in a big conflict with The Intercept, now he's the co-founder. He is literally the only reason why there is an Intercept, because he brought the Snowden documents, and a billionaire named Pierre Omidyar promised to create this media company called First Look. It was supposed to spin off several magazine format websites that were going to be truth tellers, and all the other ones never materialized. The Intercept did, but then they hired someone named Betsy Reed as the chief editor. But Glenn had said from the start, and I think Jeremy Scahill and Laura Poitras did too, that their contracts, which was a lot of money, gave them full editorial independence. So they could not be censored. They could publish anything they wanted. And in this case, Greenwald tried to publish an article about the Hunter Biden leaks, and they censored him. They wanted him to pull out all the critical information critical of Biden. And he resigned very publicly. He published the article draft form, the form that he submitted to his editors. He published that, and he published the communications of them shutting him down. And then he went on Tucker Carlson. What am I forgetting, Kelly?
Well, we're going to play a small part of that interview, which is my favorite part of his answer here. But we should talk about the letter and what The Intercept tried to omit, that one sentence, which basically, you have all the intelligence agency officials saying, oh, this is consistent with Russian disinformation, which, I mean, that wording goes all the way back to, 2016, when they first were saying, the hacks or leaks, which turned out later to be shown to be leaks of CrowdStrike and the DNC emails, that it was consistent with Russian actors. This seems to be, it's language that is, or not seems to be, it is language that is purposefully meant to lead the reader to a certain conclusion without them actually stating it as a fact. And so when Glenn Greenwald wanted to leave in the part of what they said, that after that, it has all, it's consistent with Russian disinformation, but we don't have any evidence for that. That's what they wanted to omit, which is kind of important, if you ask me, that says they don't have any evidence for it. And it's basically just misleading. So I can play this one part, or do you want to elaborate on that about the letter?
No, that's really a really important point. Right there in the letter, they admit they don't have any evidence. Mm-hmm. It's just trust us. And they lie for a living. So
right. And I, as scary a time as it is now, everything that's going on, I am so thankful for people like Glenn Greenwald and Afshin Rattansi, and, ones I can count on both hands, but the journalists that we have that are really traditional, pretty far leftists, I think, for the most part, but they are willing to speak out against the establishment, Democrats against the intelligence agencies that, as Glenn describes in this clip, are really kind of are working together. So I'll play this one little part of his answer.
This is the real story of the last 4 years of the Trump administration, which is that for a long time on the left, there was a healthy skepticism of the CIA.
Yes, there was.
There was a lot of anti-war activism in the Bush and Cheney years. That has all disappeared. And the reason it's disappeared is because the CIA, from the very first days of the Trump administration, even before he was inaugurated, devoted themselves to sabotaging the administration because Donald Trump questioned just a few of their pieties. And that can't be done in Washington. Whoever does that must be destroyed. And so the CIA and the deep state operatives became heroes of the liberal left, the people who support the Democratic Party. They're now in a full union with the neocons, the Bush Cheney operatives, the CIA, Silicon Valley, and Wall Street. That is the union of power, along with mainstream media outlets that are fully behind the Democratic Party, which is likely to at least take over one branch of government, if not all of them, in the coming election. And that is a very alarming proposition because they're authoritarian, they believe in censorship, and they believe in suppression of information that exposes them in any kind of a critical light.
That was my favorite part of the whole interview because he dared to say that, which I think if you've been watching with a critical eye, that's pretty clear what he describes.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. The Democratic Party has just been enveloped now by, I hate the word intelligence community because that's just too much of a euphemism, more like the intelligence mafia, which is not just the agencies, it's not just the United States. There's all kinds of privatization and stuff too, but it's scary. And they've used their tools. Clearly, they used some of them in 2016. They got caught. They were not held accountable in any criminal way. But instead of backing off, which you would think maybe they would do, they doubled down. And their hands are all over this election.
And I want to point out something else. When this story broke about Glenn Greenwald, there was a lot of criticism of him. Oh, he went on Tucker Carlson. It's Fox News. I cannot count how many times I saw that on Twitter. People just instantly dismissing it and ignoring it because it was on Fox News. Well, that is also by design that none of the other networks, the mainstream, we'll call them Democrat channels, because they do that on purpose so that people will police themselves and not watch something because it's on Fox News. I have a dream that all of these wonderful journalists will get together on something that's not RT America, because again, that's even worse because you've got some great journalists there, but it's Russia Today America. So a lot of people won't listen to Lee Camp, or even I'll say Larry King is over there. Remember Larry King? Yes, he's on, RT America. Ed Schultz was there because he was shut down by MSNBC for reporting on the Bernie campaign back in 2015, 2016. So I wish that they would band together and find a truly independent platform so that people can't just use that as an excuse to, I'm not going to listen to that because it's only on Fox or Breitbart or whatever. I am not, dissuaded by that. I go to wherever, I don't care the source. I want the information and I'll vet it from there. But
yeah. All right, well, running short on time. So I'm just going to mention a couple things that are part of my concerns, but I don't have enough time to get into them. But I will. I'm going to do more on these things. One of my concerns about all of these extraordinary measures that are being taken, new rules, if you will, no observers, long periods of time where ballots can be counted or messed with. Mm-hmm. And the whole sort of planned outcome of on election night, no winner is called, and a clear statements that, hey, look, Pennsylvania has come right out and said, look, we're not going to have all the ballots counted by election night. And they're making it's one of the big talking points, telling everybody that. But at the same time, there are activist groups. Some of them are spinning off of something called the Transition Integrity Project, which a lot of people know about, but I will talk about some more later, where they're actually wargaming a situation. There are different scenarios of, a clear Biden win, a clear Trump win, a toss-up, all this. and planning, supposedly they're planning a peaceful transition, which is one of the reasons why this country's been successful, because we've been able to have peaceful transitions of power. They don't seem to be that worried about winning the election. They're worried about, they put out all these fear-mongering things that Trump's not going to leave the White House and all this stuff, that he's not going to accept the results and all that. So as what looks like a spinoff, or at least activist groups that are using their published scenarios and plans and this and that, there are activist groups who some Zoom call recordings have been released, and they are planning to start disrupting, shutting things down the day after the election. And we've already been told that there won't be, their framing is that Trump is going to do a coup against Biden, which if you're not in office, I don't know how you could be coup, but I don't know. All right, so maybe you could use that framing, but when the real situation is, it's been a lot like a slow motion coup against Trump, and certainly his base believes that, and so they're planning to do things like shut down cities, the major things in cities, infrastructure, bridges, buildings, all this stuff, and to just force the authorities to say that Joe Biden won, or whatever. I guess they're saying that in their view it will be a Biden win, or it's going to be uncertain. And then there was another Zoom call, and again, I'll give some more detail about this and links in another podcast, but another one was a group of federal employees who were preparing for activism in a situation where the outcome was uncertain, and how they would use the things that they do, like allowing access to buildings, allowing access to government IT systems, and that they themselves may have to decide who won the election. Just some really, just bizarre stuff. So they're planning these protests and everything at a time purposely before an election outcome can be determined, which just, that I'm really uncomfortable with that. And, for the record, if anyone of those people happens to be listening, I don't see you as heroes like you do. I don't envision you as a hero for doing something like this. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of other people don't either. Just so you know.
Right. Exactly.
And using like Occupy Wall Street framing, the people who you are serving at this moment are the exact people who Occupy Wall Street was protesting against. So, trying to take on that mantle is total bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are going to realize that. Sorry, I didn't intend to get this hostile, but that's how I feel.
It's hard not to get heated. I find it odd, finding myself agreeing with Trump and Trump supporters on these issues about a coup and about things the media being against him and fake news. He's not wrong. And I'm not, I didn't vote for Trump last time or this time. I voted Green in a battleground state proudly, in spite of vote shaming I got from so many different places. But I think there are more of us out there. We see things for what they are, but we know that we're going to have the mob after us, whether it's on social media or even for people that aren't in this country that might be listening to this. It has gotten to a point where it's ripped apart friendships and families. It is at a all-time toxic level, the warring factions in this country. But some of us can just try to set the partisanship aside and see it for what it is. But it's not without personal cost. Like Glenn Greenwald, resigned. He doesn't have his big salary anymore, but decided that speaking the truth was more important. And I think when people like him do it, more will follow, which is at least gives me hope. But not having free and fair elections and not having freedom of the press, real freedom of the press, is far scarier than any bad president could be in office for 4 or 8 years. And I just wish more people, I guess, saw it that way.
Yeah, and there are a lot of other things. There are agendas out there that things like the Great Reset that I'll go into more later, and a lot of people saying, there's going to be a new normal, an economic collapse that has been coming for quite a while, and some of that really needs to be talked about, and I will do some of that later. But for right now, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to a bonus question. And basically, we're just going to talk about, we're going to tell you what we think might happen in this election and what we think might be the outcome. Not so much a prediction, but just kind of our thoughts on what we see here and how it looks and what we think is likely. The answer to the bonus question is in a bonus segment for patrons. You can get access to that, and there's one for almost every interview and podcast by subscribing at Patreon. Plus, you get access to other patrons-only episodes and our new Discord channel where we can talk among ourselves, do some Q&A live streams and such. That's my tease. I hope some of you will join us. And now I'll continue with the interview wrap-up. All right. Well, thanks so much for helping me do this, and that's what we think, guys. So
we convene afterwards, and we could maybe go into some specifically what happened in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, because those are going to be big stories, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea to make this a bit of a series.
Mm-hmm.
We'll figure out when seems to be the best time to do it, and we'll be back. So thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for coming on the show, Kelly, and doing this important discussion, in my view.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me. Great to talk with you, Joanne. Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening. Special thanks to Kelly Lane for guest hosting with me. Follow Kelly on Twitter at Kelly's Words, KELLEYSWORDS. This podcast, independent media, so listener support, really important. Patreon.com/AroundTheEmpire, PayPal.me/AroundTheEmpirePod. Find the podcast on any mobile podcast app, on the website, AroundTheEmpire.com, or on Patreon or on YouTube. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. Follow on Twitter at AroundTheEmpire, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.